This video is in response to the video Objecting to Objectivism. It was posted in 2008 by FFreeThinker and featured Matt Dillahunty and Russell Glasser. And it was critical of objectivism, and I'm going to take 5 of those criticisms and look at them in more depth, maybe offer a rebuttal. The first criticism was that Rand's ethics is dogmatic because it includes some must-do clauses, or you must do certain things in order to be moral. And I'm going to argue that while that's true of an intrinsic theory of values, something Immanuel Kant might promote, it's not true of Ayn Rand's ethics, which would involve an objective theory of values. So I believe that Russell Glasser was mistaking objectivism for an intrinsic theory, and let's read about those from Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. There are, in essence, 3 schools of thought on the nature of the good: the intrinsic, the subjective, and the objective. The intrinsic theory holds that the good is inherent in things or actions as such, regardless of their context and consequences, regardless of any benefit or injury they may cause to the actors and subjects involved. It's a theory that divorces the concept of good from beneficiaries, and the concept of value from valuer and purpose, claiming that the good is good in, by, and of itself. Now, if objectivism were promoting that, then Russell's criticism would hold. That would be dogmatism, basically rule following regardless of the consequences or the outcome. Example from Immanuel Kant would be that it's good to be honest even if it kills you. Kant would say you should be honest with a murderer who's looking for your own mother, or something like that. But that's not true of objectivism. It's not honesty to a fault. I'll give you another quote from the same chapter, What is Capitalism? In Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Just after introducing the intrinsic and subjectivist theory, Rand offers the third theory, the objective theory. The objective theory holds that the good is neither an attribute of things in themselves nor of man's emotional states, but an evaluation of the facts of reality by man's consciousness according to a rational standard of value. So it's not something out there. Good isn't something out there, and the good isn't necessarily just something in here, or in here, in your heart. It's a mix. It's the world and the organism, the environment and the organism coming together. And there's going to be some kind of harmony based on the nature of the organism. The nature of the organism will kind of dictate a little bit about what is good for that organism or not, whether fire is good for it, whether water is good for it. And those things will be objective values for all the creatures in that species that you're looking at. So it's kind of more of a scientific way of looking at morality instead of a rule-following, dictatorial way, or what Rand would say would be a whim-worshipping, touchy-feely way of looking at ethics. So she's got this third way of looking at ethics. It's different from dogmatism, which would be more like intrinsicism, like that found in Immanuel Kant. So that's my explanation for criticism number 1, that Rand's ethics is not necessarily dogmatic at all, although it is limited by the nature of the entities in question. So if man is a certain way, then some things will be good for him and some things won't be. And that's based on his nature, not based on his gut feeling or on some rules given from on high. The second criticism was that in justifying kind of a non-sacrificial living, Rand uses the concept of rational self-interest. Well, Matt Dillahunty claimed that the concept rational self-interest isn't clearly defined in that context, the quote that they pulled. And he would say that it could mean more than one thing to two different people. Russell adds at this point, what if a guy wants to sacrifice himself for somebody else? Who the hell is Ayn Rand to tell him he can't do that? Well, the issue involves a debate about sacrifice, a strict definition of sacrifice, and going back to whether man has a nature or not. The sacrifice issue is easier. I'll take that head on. That one, a strict definition of sacrifice would be an exchange for a higher value or a good for a lower one. Give you an example with money, it would be exchange of $1 for a quarter. That's a sacrifice. It would mean giving someone something you want or need highly in exchange for something that you don't. That's what sacrifice means to Ayn Rand, and that's the way she's using it. The first issue, the human nature issue, again going back to whether man has a stable human nature, whether he's a certain kind of being, whether he has identity. If he does, then we can find out what self-interest would be in an outline form at least. There'll always be some idiosyncrasies in humans, some aesthetic tastes and preferences like wanting vanilla ice cream instead of chocolate. Rand doesn't make a claim either way of which one would be better, and she realizes that there will be different answers to some of the questions of what people do with their lives, and I'll offer a quote as proof of that. The third criticism was a quote of Peikoff as Russell talking, and he said that Peikoff said, strictly speaking, existence aren't objective, they just are. Minds are what it is that is objective, or conceptual processes. Now, Russell had a problem with that. He called it backwards thinking, and it stems on the differentiation of metaphysics from epistemology, or ontology from epistemology. Basically, let me see if I can. Okay, let's explain objective in relation to how its opposite, which is subjective. Subjective, what is that? Subjective means that something pertains singularly to a particular individual or entity. That's like if you have a toothache, okay? That's your toothache, it's your pain. And it's only your toothache and only your pain, and you're the only one that's going to experience it. That's subjective. Now, if there were such a thing as an objective toothache, okay, then everybody's going to have the same pain for the same duration and the same intensity. It's a shared experience. So objective is about not the experience itself, but the sharedness of the experience. And so in the same way, like a concept is what allows the human mind to share an identification of something out in reality. The same concept can be in many different heads at the same time and shared, so that we can all be talking about the same thing, and that sharedness of it is the objectivity of it. Again, if you had a toothache or a nightmare or something that was, specific to you and your experience, that's subjective. And then when we go into using proper conceptual processes and logic to understand the identification of items in reality, then we can all talk about them as if they're the same thing. That's the objectivity. It has to do with the way we think, not the way things are. The way things are, they are as they are, and we can either speak of them subjectively, like, hey, that looks green to me, or we can say, speak of them objectively, hey, that's a lamp, and we can all know what a lamp is and talk about it. So the objectivity really does reside in the way we think, and not necessarily in the way things are. Things just are. Okay. Next criticism was that there seems to be no room for subjective valuation in objectivism. And again, this I think hinges on a dichotomy between subjectivist and intrinsicist theories of value. If you look at intrinsic theories of value, things are good whether you like it or not. And subjectivist theories of value, things are good if you feel it, whether they're good for you or not. So if you felt like getting drunk or high all the time and being unconscious, as long as you felt it, it would be good for you, because subjectivist theories say the rubric that you judge, by which you judge whether an act is good or bad, is simply whether you feel like doing it or not. Okay, so that's the subjectivist theory. Now, in Rand's objective theory, it doesn't mean that all subjectivism goes away. Every person actually values as an individual, and like I said before, with vanilla and chocolate ice cream, there will be some things that we like and don't like. And there's a quote from Rand that kind of allows for this. It lets us know that she was thinking about that different people will value different things. Here it is from What is Capitalism again? Since values are established contextually, every man must judge for himself in the context of his own knowledge, goals, and interests. So Rand is saying that we could have our own interests and goals unique to us. That's kind of subjective. So even though we will ultimately have this rubric where some things will be good for humans and some things won't, there's some room for aesthetic tastes and preferences and stuff like that. Let's see. The last criticism I'll mention is the dig at Gulch. Excuse me. Matt Dillahunty mentioned, with all these intelligent men of the mind going on strike, and who's going to be the janitor? It was his question was, well, where are we going to put the janitors, and what about the menial jobs? I call it the janitor paradox. Again, Rand had a place for everybody, and it isn't a philosophy meant only for elites. It's meant for all of society. Again, I'll issue a quote so that we can see that that's what she meant. And again, the criticism itself hinges on the presupposition that in objectivism, a man's ability, the degree of his ability, is ethically relevant. That's the criticism hinges on that. Now here's a quote from Rand. In this sense, a man of limited ability who rises by his own purposeful effort from unskilled laborer to shop foreman is a career man in the proper ethical meaning of the word, while an intelligent man who stagnates in the role of a company president, using 1/10 of his potential ability, is a mere job holder, and so is a parasite posturing in a job too big for his ability. It is not the degree of man's ability that is ethically relevant in this issue, but the full purposeful use of his ability. So what Rand is saying is that it doesn't matter if you're a janitor. It matters if you're using your mind and your abilities and you're growing and moving forward. And it's more of a general process that it does include everybody, not just the elites. So that concludes my video. I hope you actually have rebuttals to my rebuttal, because I'd like to engage you some more on this, but thank you very much.